This is supposed to be Tales of the Hot Tub Curmudgeon. Well, actually, my butt is in the hot tub, but because I have a big wound down the middle of my chest from 2 sternotomies in 4 months, I can't get all the way in, and the breeze is a little bit chilly, although it's the end of July. Climate change is kind of weird here in the Pacific Northwest, and so I am hot tub curmudgeonly here. One of my kids has said that the value of these videos for him is to be able to tell his kids someday what his dad was like. That's probably a scary proposition for some of you, but I'll tell you a few things about my dad. My dad was a bigot and an anti-Semite. Maybe the worst example was a Thanksgiving from hell. We used to have these big Thanksgivings, lots of relatives there. Once at my house we had 24 people, and the tradition was that my mother would start by reading something from Deuteronomy, I think, about teaching your children to honor the holiday. And then she would read something about the pilgrims on the Mayflower and how bleak was the outlook for their chances, and it would end with something like, who'd want to bet money on these people making it. Then we would go around the table and people would either tell things that they were thankful for, or Damon would play his French horn, young Duncan would play his guitar and sing a song he'd made up, maybe somebody'd read a poem like that. Okay, so we got this big Thanksgiving dinner at Ruth Kirk's house and Duncan's wife, and so after my mom reads the thing about the pilgrims, and then she reads the thing from Deuteronomy, my dad, sitting next to her, I guess, figures it's his turn, so he pipes up and he says, when are the Jews going to figure out why everybody hates them? So he puts this turd out there in the middle of the Thanksgiving table, and well, those of us who knew my dad realized that what you got to do is, it's just sort of like he just farted. It was a mind fart, and you just let it go. You don't respond to it. You don't answer it. You don't respond. You just and you go to the next person. But we had Ruth's brother-in-law, Stanton Hall, and he was a good Mormon, I think, on the High Council or something. So he felt obliged to engage my dad and try to straighten him out. Well, and some other people also too. And now all of a sudden what you got is this 70-year-old sleepy old fart all of a sudden just wakes up ready to debate, because he was a debater in high school and college, and he loved to debate. And oh boy, somebody has taken the bait. So after this went on for about 10 minutes, people began to get up and go outside to smoke, and other people decided, what the hell, we're never going to go around the table. So they got up and left too, and the party just sort of collapsed. And in days following, my mother, who is a lot like the ACLU, she didn't agree with what my dad said, but by God, she would defend his right to say it. And so she was mad at the rest of us that we got up and left the table and didn't let my dad have his say. So my dad and I would take long drives over toward, Asotin and Troy, Oregon, and we would hike up the Wenaha River and go backpacking. Well, he drove this crappy little Ford Maverick, and he wouldn't go above about 52 miles an hour. And they were just 2-lane roads a long way over there. But man, that was hot, and man, that was slow, and I would get disgusted, and I couldn't get him to speed up, and he had no air conditioning. And one day I figured out that if he got started talking about, excuse the language, niggers or Jews or Italians or fat women or labor unions, that his foot would just push that gas pedal to the floor, and we would just go flying down the road at 62 miles an hour, and the time would pass. And in earlier days, I would have tried to change the subject, or I would have contradicted him, but I would just sort of feed him a little bit if he'd slow down, and man, the time passed quickly. Another time, I may have already told this story, but we're driving home from one of these campouts, and there's this radio program. I was searching the dial for some talk radio. So there's this dramatization where a Protestant family in like 1840 Canada, mom, dad, and 3 adult sons. There were no Protestant women around for the boys to marry, so they married French Canadian Catholic women, which nobody was happy with, but what can you do? That's all there was. And then there was an Indian attack, and the dad and the 3 boys were all killed by the Indians. And so the mom and the 3 daughters-in-law were left behind. And so mom says to the 3 ladies, you need to go back to your own people. And one of the ladies says, Mom, your people are my people. Your home is my home. I'm with you. Now, I recognized immediately that that was from the book of Ruth in the Old Testament. And I think it's agreed that the purpose of the book of Ruth was that when the Babylonians said that the Jews could return to Jerusalem, Ezra and Nehemiah got upset to find so many intermarriages between the Jews who were still there and pagan women, or non-Jewish women. And so they tried to break up all these marriages. And so the book of Ruth was written down or promulgated because Ruth, was the grandmother of the big Jew of all time, King David. King David's grandmother was Ruth the Moabitess. So this story was a semi-modern enactment of the book of Ruth. Now what's amazing is that Pop wakes up sometime in the middle of this story, and he's listening to it, and about the time that the story is wrapping up and the gal that's supposed to be Ruth is telling the mother, who's supposed to be Naomi, your people are my people, Pop says, you know what this is? This is an excuse for miscegenation. This is an apology for interracial marriages. It's disgusting. Now, see, I thought that was amazing that this old fart, not a scholar of the Bible by any means, and he certainly didn't recognize this as being from the book of Ruth, that he would jump right in there and recognize what this story was about. Don't you think that's amazing?